Well, good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be back with you once more. I know most of you, I think, but probably a few I don't, and I look forward to seeing you and getting to know you a little bit over the course of the day. I'll be with you through dinner tonight, so I'm looking forward to sitting through some sessions as well, particularly the one about the new grape varieties in Bordeaux. That is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Well, this is going to be different. Different from what? Different from the other seminars and tastings you've seen me lead. And why is that? Almost all of those, I think, in fact, every one of them has been a vertical tasting and a blind tasting. This is not that, as you can see. This is an informative seminar, an educational seminar. Hence, you'll, I think, see pretty quickly that I'll be going about it somewhat differently. Well, how did this come to be? Colleen and I and Eric were considering themes to present at this year's event, which I think was scheduled for last year, wasn't it?
2 years ago.
2 years ago, something like that. So this has evolved, and in fact, many of the wines on the table here were acquired and cellared a long time ago. And I proposed the idea of looking at the wines that you probably rarely taste. And could we legitimately say that all of these appellations that are listed here in the subtitle are in fact satellites, in the sense that they revolve around the superstars, the two glamorous appellations of the right bank, Saint-Émilion and Pomerol. You've had an introduction already to Pomerol, and in a way, I think I might add some touches to that as we go, because you can't avoid talking about Saint-Émilion proper and Pomerol in order to shed light on these other more or less contiguous appellations. Well, these are, of course, the AOPs of the Libournais, as it's called. You probably know all of these. Let's go down quickly the ones that we're going to cover today, not in the order of the presentation, but as they appear here on the map. Fronsac, Lalande de Pomerol, Montagne Saint-Émilion, and Saint-Georges. Unfortunately, we could not get wines from the other two Saint-Émilion satellites, Lussac and Puisquin. Then we're going to look at Franc, Côte de Bordeaux today, and Castillon, Côte de Bordeaux. So it's a good assortment. There are 6 origins and 8 wines. And I've just tasted through the wines myself, fresh from the bottle. And I'm very happy with what I found, because my hidden agenda in wanting to cover this topic with you is that there's a lot to discover in Bordeaux apart from the tiny sliver, the top, shall we say, 5% of all Bordeaux wines, the ones that, of course, you know and love and your cellars are full of, I don't doubt. So this is an opportunity to look at wines that you should be considering as well. They're a fraction of the cost of the superstars. And some of those in this tasting, are amazingly fine wines, which are not precocious wines, not delicate, fragile, light wines, unserious wines. These are wines that you could lay down for at least 10 years, some of them much longer. All right? So I encourage you to think about these wines very carefully if you want to get the most out of your wine spending. All right. I think you've seen something about this. It wasn't covered in a lot of depth in the Pomerol seminar, but I want to touch on the current language, parlance of soil scientists, using terms that most of us are probably not comfortable with, but I know how much you want to absorb something new and hopefully interesting and helpful. Why am I talking about this entire seminar, which I am, as the opposition of two types, broad types of soils, calcosol and perosol. Because, again, we're simplifying, that's how it breaks down. We have, in fact, one wine representing the perosol family. And we have all the others, which more or less speak of the other. So let me explain. The calcosol, calcium carbonate limestone, that is, okay, with clays and sands, because nothing is that simple or uniform in terms of soils, all right? And this is one real-world photograph of what a calcosol might appear to be. And you can see that since Saint-Émilion and the town of Saint-Émilion, more or less at the summit, is circled, that is where these limestone soils, calcosol, and specifically you see the hatch marks, the brick marking there, the famous calcaire à astérie, the asteroided limestone, starfish limestone, which will come up again and again here. Now, there's something else. Look at the great base underneath not only Saint-Émilion, but over towards Pomerol, the little dots. You see that large area on the diagram here? All of this area here, that's the other general component here in the Libournais that we always have to mention when we talk about the underpinning, the soils. And it's the molasse du Fronsac, which is sort of a sandy clay, not on the surface, down below. And yet sands and clays do come up and are part of surface layers as well. Then we have the perosol. And the perosol, even though they're a small fraction of all the soils in France overall, they're quite important in certain wine regions, notably right here in Bordeaux, not just on the right bank, but especially on the left. Especially on the left, especially along the Gironde. The perosol, high proportion of stony matter of all sizes, gravel, stones, much larger ones, with, again, clays and sands figuring in. So on the left of that area, you can see one version, and only one version, of what a perosol soil would look like there. You can see it in the photograph. And then you see a representation, a stylized representation from Pierre Lehong there with three layers or horizons. Again, the key point is that these are very stony soils. And that takes us to the Pomerol side of the equation. And it's exactly why I've organized the tasting this way. In fact, there was a method to the madness. How to mix, how to present these 8 wines to you in a way that made sense. Not just from the point of view of the taste profile, but the origin and the conceptual understanding of each appellation. Believe me, I came up with at least a half a dozen different possibilities. And I said to myself, well, what would make sense is choose the one wine to start with that is the odd man out. Choose the perosol and leave the rest to another sequencing, which is exactly why we're starting with Lalande de Pomerol first. Does all that make sense to you? Okay, now since I've broached the subject of soils and geology, now I'm really going to give it to you. I'm going to full blast now. All right, so let's look at the Pomerol part of the Libourne here. Yes, I know you've talked about it. That's why I said that perhaps I could embellish what you've already heard with some hard facts. Can you all see that? Not very well, probably. You can see it okay? All right. Well, up here, let me just, before I start to click through, up here is the famous so-called plateau of Pomerol, right, that you've been discussing. You see the famous names there? And of course, it crosses over the border into Saint-Émilion, doesn't it? in a geological sense, in the sense of the soils, because that northwestern side corner of Saint-Émilion is also placed on soils which more or less continue and reappear on the plateau of Pomerol. Hence the differing personalities of the wines there, such as Cheval Blanc. Okay, now. Yes.
Where's the blue clay?
Well, that is on the top of the hill, okay? The first or the highest terrace, because all of these are alluvial terraces in this area. We're generally speaking about sedimentary soils. They've been deposited and layered over the eons. So, number one, the high terrace of Pomerol. Now, there's something peculiar there. Right there, do you see the arrow coming down from the name Petrus? Yes. I think that name was already floated in the first session today. And look at how there's something distinctive and odd about the soils. You see this little cutout? That has a very curious name in French. La boutonnière de Petrus, the buttonhole of Petrus. How could that be? Why would that be? Well, it just so happens that magical clays, because that's the right word, magical clays, are close to the surface, indeed on the top of the surface. These are the famous swelling clays, the smectites, which have extraordinary properties in regulating water. All right? Not only are they here, and some in the northwest part of Saint-Émilion, but they come again across the rivers on the other side of Bordeaux in some of the cru of Sauternes, and in Saint-Julien-Pauillac, together with gravels along the Gironde. So these smectites, these very special clays, have a role with the very finest red wines of Bordeaux in the world. And may I say, this is not about Burgundy, is it, today? It's about Bordeaux. But
it's the same calcaire.
Well, I'm not thinking about the calcaire now. I'm thinking about the clay. There's a lot of sex appeal to limestone, but none for clay. Let me argue that perhaps it should be reversed. Some of the finest Grand Crus of Vosne-Romanée also feature swelling clays, smectites, in their soils. All right, in any event, I could get detoured easily, as you can see. Okay, so then this layer further down towards the Barbane stream, we'll have that name again and again today, and further along the valley of the Isle, you see it there, I-S-L-E, river, which is not mentioned. The Dordogne is often spoken of, but the Isle, not very much, even though it played an important role in creating, at one time in geological history, these terraces. Okay, so that's the second layer, or terrace, and then there's the one quite far down in the valley. That is not important for wine growing, okay? So those are the three. Then there's something else, isn't there? All right? And what is that? I think I've used the term mollasque du Fronsac, haven't I? The colluvial materials, that yellowish, is it yellow, yellow-green, and so on. And then it comes up again over here, doesn't it? On the other side of the Isle, in where? In Fronsac, on the Butte de Fronsac, a promontory. And there's a piece of it there, together with something else, once more, that we have to talk about, because I talked about the calcaire à Astérie in reference to Saint-Émilion, but Fronsac, in many ways, mirrors Saint-Émilion. That's another clue to the quality of the wines. And we're going to come back to that, of course, because our last two wines are from Fronsac. Eric?
What is the altitude of that Fronsac? Do you have a sense?
Well, things are called mountains in France, which are usually quite small. The highest promontory in the Libournais is 114 meters. Okay. And that's elsewhere. That's in Montagne. It's not that high. But in reference to the countryside, it's a view over all that is below. Okay? All right. Well, okay, let's begin our journey, shall we? Are you ready to taste?
Yes.
So here, somebody said yes. What, you want me to be quiet so you can taste? All right, here we have Lalande de Pomerol. You see where it is, don't you? And you can see that it's right alongside. Let me make this point again. You see this, the blue river there, the heavier blue line is the river Isle. And then coming from the other direction, see this one? That's the stream, and that's really what it's called, a stream, not a river, the Bouard, which is a delimiting area for many of the zones, okay? So that's where we're going to begin. And I thought, since you've watched them, no doubt, I didn't see them, but some lovely videos. There's so many fantastic wine videos these days all over the world. I enjoy watching them and sort of using them and extracting material from them myself for presentations like this. So hopefully they'll forgive me at Chateau Lafleur de Bouard when I tell them that I stole these images from their own video. Okay, but I wanted to take you there. I wanted it to be not just this wine in the glass. It has to be more than that. Look at the beauty of the setting. What does it stimulate? What ideas, what thoughts, what reactions? Thinking about those soils. And we're going to come further along that road and talk about the fact that as soon as I've told you that it's Parasol, just Parasol in Lalande de Pomerol, I'm going to have to contradict myself. It almost does. And it's almost like the galets, the smooth, rounded stones in a way. Look at this place. This was a benchmark in the new era for Lalande de Pomerol. Incredible investments you can only imagine to create a place like this. I thought as I put the slideshow together, theoretical question, can you know something about the style of the wine by the style of the exterior of the facilities? I'll leave that sort of hanging there, and you can argue for and against, if you like. So, wow, what could this possibly be? Has anyone visited Lafleur de Bouard here? One person? Another? 2, 3, good for you. Good for you, but there's a lot of discovery, isn't there, ahead for the rest of you? So what do those look like? Maybe vats, perhaps? Yes, gravity-fed vats. Look at this extraordinary cellar. This is not in Pomerol. This is not in a glamorous chateau in Saint-Émilion or in Pauillac. This is in Lalande de Pomerol. Wait a minute. When was the last time I actually drank a bottle of Lalande de Pomerol? I'll leave that for you to think about as well. All right. You got the wine in the glass. Make sure you're tasting the right one, the right glass. So, facts and stats. I'm going to kind of have a laundry list for you, and you can make of it what you will. What I wanted to talk about is the nuance. Let's go beneath the surface quite literally here in Lalande de Pomerol. Yes, in the commune of Lalande, because there are 2 communes in the appellation, Lalande and Néac, you see the spelling there. There are 2 communes. And they have very different soils and make different wines. Complicated, always. Wine is so complicated, isn't it? So, in Lalande, you have all sorts of gravels and sands. They are the true parasol. But in Néac, which is the south, that commune in the southeastern flank corner of the district, right along the Bourbon, okay, there you have many other soils. You have brunisol, which are sands and clays which have been oxidized to give a brownish color. You have neoluvisoil, silts and clays as well. And you have something else called redoxy soil, which are quite peculiar. Some say not the best for wine grapes. Why? Because they have a fluctuating water table. In redoxy soils, there's a high water table in the winter months, which actually touches the tendrils of the roots of the vines, and it recedes in the summer. So it is argued that the best Lalande de Pomerol is a composite of Lalande, commune of Lalande, and the commune of Néac, and they're very different soils. And so, is it any secret that this superb wine, which I think it is, Lafleur de Bouard, is exactly that? They have 18 hectares under vine in Néac and 11 gravel clay. Okay, 11 in Lalande. 30-year-old vines, ratio of grape varieties. Well, I probably won't have to repeat that again throughout this session because they're all almost exactly the same. Overwhelmingly Merlot, with Cabernet Franc, maybe a little Cabernet Sauvignon, maybe a splash of Côte or Malbec. Other grapes that are permitted under the law, Carmenère, Petit Verdot, are not grown, so they don't figure in this area. So you have a very simple formula if you're just going to look at grape varieties. Are you tasting the wine?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Good. Okay, very cutting edge, modern, up-to-date winemaking. That's reflected in the facilities. You see that there, okay? I don't have to read that all. There is a liking, a preference, because that's what it is. It's a choice, for a fairly high proportion of new oak, all right? You see that. So up to 2 years, I don't know whether it's certain barrels and not others, how they decide that from year to year. That would be even 24 months, which is a long time in modern Bordeaux. You want my comments on the wine, or do you want to just hear me talk more about other things? Like, you want? Really? Okay. I'm going to give you some things here. These are from my notes just an hour ago, sitting in this room here. Clean. That's the first priority of any wine, regardless of type, that it's clean. Nothing off. Very youthful, second impression. Held in, restrained, reserved, not developed. Well, you expect that, 2016. Excellent vintage here, no doubt, right? We know about 16. We've talked about 16 the last time we were all together 2 years ago. Healthy. Healthy what? Healthy, mature fruit. Important. Not underripe, not overripe, healthy and mature, carefully sorted. All of these things are key. Dark and red fruits, I found. This is personal, and that will continue to change as the wine lives on in bottle. High quality integrated oak. Yes, the oak is present to the nose, and yet it's well selected oak. They spent a lot of money for the barrels. It's reflected in the wine. On the palate, I'm not going to do this with all the wines, but let me just, lead you in a certain direction with this one. Very clean again as it enters the mouth, direct, positive, and poised as well. Medium weight and maybe a little bit more in terms of the feel and the substance. Excellent equilibrium and the tension of the wine in the finale I particularly like. It's reserved, it's slow to open, restrained, undeveloped finish, fine quality. Those are my notes, virtually verbatim.
For me.
Say, I'm sorry?
Tension, you said?
Tension.
What is that?
What is tension in a wine? That's a good question, Eric. You're going to put me on the spot to try to define that, aren't
No,
you?
in fact, I'm listening to you.
Well, how about describing it through other means? What if you squeeze your fist tight like that? That's tension, isn't it? Can't wines have that feel, that profile in your mouth? Because it's in your mouth in particular that the tension would be noticed. What do you think? Is that clear to you? Does that work?
Works fine. I mean, I would go to the balance or the tension between the tannin and the fruit.
Well, tension is delivered probably, especially, by the acidity and tannin, if there is tannin in the wine, which there is here.
Good.
That's probably where it comes from most of all, but it's the overall construction of the wine.
Great, thanks.
So,
Be the opposite of flat
Oh, yes. Indeed, that's the antonym. Perfect. Perfect. Okay, anything else? All right, let's go on here, because I'm afraid I'm taking too much time already. All right, so let's see here. Right next door to the east, Montagne Saint-Émilion. Okay? The first of the satellites, the two that we're going to look at. Lovely village. The soils of Saint-Émilion. Okay, very quickly, let's go through the same exercise that we did for Pomerol and environs, all right? In fact, the same geologist created this model as well. Now, can you orient yourselves? Can you see where you are here? All right, here, Saint-Émilion, the town. You see it right there on the top of the slope, right on the line. Anyone been to Saint-Émilion? That's everybody here, isn't it? Every single person who's been to Saint-Émilion? Oh my God, there's a reason why it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Even if you weren't a lover of the wines or interested in wine, you have to see it. It's touristic in the best sense. And you don't want to know what? Are there any Bordelais here in the room? Bordeaux is not a very touristic place. I'm sorry. There are beautiful chateaux, and there are some things, of course, of historic interest. But until very recently, the city of Bordeaux wasn't very charming. They cleaned it up a lot in the last 15 years, okay? Now it's another matter. But Bordeaux is another place you associate with beautiful scenery and countryside in the main. Curiously, maybe there's an opposite relationship here. Some of the most lovely scenes and scenery of Bordeaux are associated with the humblest of the wines of Bordeaux. So be it. All right, so let's look at this, and I'm going to emphasize 2 points again, because that's the theme here. Number 4, it's the same number 4 as on the map of Pomerol. You see what that is? Molasse du Fronsac. You see how it is the band, the stratum underlying what the limestone of Saint-Émilion, the plateau of Saint-Émilion. And of course, above it, you have what? It is that on which the town of Saint-Émilion is based, carved out of the calcaire à Astéry. So these themes, these geological themes, are going to be repeated now for the other wines that we're going to look at. Montagne Saint-Émilion, all right? Vieux Château Saint-André. I particularly wanted to show you this wine because it's a sleeper. I guess that's the right word for it. And it has kind of the touch of genius about it. Why do I say that? Because the family behind it, you know the name, Berrouet. All right, Jean-Claude Berrouet was involved with Petrus he made, in a sense, you know what I mean? He made Petrus. He was the man behind the label.
The winemaker?
Well, there's no winemaker, but he was the technical guide. He led it. So he brought this property. I don't think they did much with it for many, many years. Bought it in the late 70s. His son, Olivier, right, now is at Petrus for more than 14 years. Jeff, and that's the way his name is written, Jeff manages Vieux Château Saint-André in Montagne, okay? What do we have? Clay and limestone soil, surprise, surprise, okay? Some are on slopes and some are on plateau. The satellites of Saint-Émilion, the 4, have something in common. They're all characterized by a promontory or a butte of some sort, and hills and valleys. More or less the same idea topographically. So age of vines quite high here now, 45. Do I need to even say anything about grape mix? I don't think so. They do some machine harvesting here, and it's a dozen years in much less new oak than our first wine, right? Much less. There's a more cautious hand. Somehow, if you've been following Berrouet and his wines, that's not a surprise. It's more conservatism at play there. So you've tasted the wine?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? Wow, dead silence?
I'm surprised. I haven't tasted this wine before.
And what if you could buy it for $25 a bottle?
I'm in.
That's the right answer, I think, personally, but that's personal, of course. Nobody can dictate that to you.
It's kind of got an interesting tartness to it, almost like a cranberry. I get kind of a tart fruit.
You know, I know what you're saying, and I agree with you. Tart to me is moving from the positive to the negative of terminology of acidity. You know, it's just just moving that direction. It's the more old-fashioned wine. It has that older cast that all of you as Bordeaux lovers and collectors, and you know exactly what I mean, right? And pre-global warming, and Bordeaux has been marked by rising temperatures and climate change. A lot of wines had that tartness, didn't they? A lot of Bordeaux red wines. What's changed is the understanding of polyphenolic maturity, but also the ripeness of the fruit. Climate change, yes, we're going to say it, it's been good for Bordeaux so far.
I also pick up the tannin difference between 1 and 2. I think Saint Andre is more tannic.
Now, may I suggest, Eric, that maybe, just maybe, we're seeing the opposition of the Perosol and the Calcasol. Yes, the limestone soils being a factor. I tend to associate the formation of acidity in the fruit with calcium carbonate content, the active lime in limestone soils, which varies in percentage a bit. So maybe, just maybe, you know, you'll think about it. Don't take this as the gospel. Just think about whether maybe there's something there. What else do I want to say here? Faintly saline. Maybe that kind of, you know, adds that concluding touch on Dur Chateau. But I also said, I must have liked it, elegant and refined, if very young. You can drink it now with pleasure if you want, no problem. But give it a little bit of time. I think, you know, it has that Barraway signature to it, and I think you may be surprised if you open this bottle in 8 years from now, give or take. Okay, anything else? Shall we go on? Yes, Killeen.
So if you open this bottle in 8 years, is it going to have that crunchy, juicy cranberries, do you think, still?
No, but I think it will maintain what, if I were a Bordelais, I would say the freshness, which is either plus or not a plus. That there's no one can tell you that you're supposed to like that if your palate says you really don't. That's my cardinal rule in wine.
Roger, just a follow-up question. Looking at all these wines.
Yes.
The first two.
Are you jumping ahead, Jeannie?
No. Let's just think about it, how you want to address it afterwards.
Yes.
So what is the cellaring potential for this group of wines compared to the other wines that, you know?
It is comfortably between 8 and 15 years. Some will go longer in a good cellar, okay? And the ones I think, especially the long distance runners, will finish the show today. Okay, so.
Are those numbers from the vintage or from now?
They're from now. Yeah, because we're tasting it today. We're tasting it today, so I'm judging, my opinion. I'm judging from what I taste right now in the glass. All right? All right, shall we go on? And let's go to this little pocket, let's call it that, this enclave within Montagne Saint-Émilion, which has been allowed to have, of course, its own appellation. Appellations are merely choices that human beings have made based on, in principle, natural conditions and differentiated personalities. But let's not stretch it too far, okay? So, all of the wines here, the 8 wines, 7 of them were on my list that I sent to Killeen, hoping that maybe, and there were others, of course, too, that we could have at our tasting today. One was not. One I did not know, In fact, I'd never tasted before this morning, Chateau Macquin in Saint-Georges, but I've had a kind of an infatuation with Saint-Georges over the years. I've encountered wines, not this one, here and again. And so I thought we really should have one wine in it, and note that it is the only 2017, so factor that in if you're doing comparisons, because these tastings always end up being a matter of comparing one wine against another, when maybe we shouldn't really let them stand alone, speak for themselves. All right, so once again, we have clays and we have limestones, south-facing slope in what is a tiny little appellation, in fact, less than about 200 hectares. All right, 40-year-old vines, no particular thing to say about the grape mix, the same. They do machine harvesting here, whether you like it or not. Sorting has pretty much become universal at any quality-minded property in Bordeaux. They use wood, they use stainless, and some concrete. I think you just heard, didn't you, from a property in Pomerol? It's kind of doing a mix of, weren't there supposed to, several vessels, I think that was the word, right? And finally, a dozen years in 1/3 new oak. So what do you think about our Chateau Macquin? Chateau Macquin. Let me see if I can coax something out of you and see what you think. I thought the nose is what I would call high-toned. In other words, it has some kind of bright, lifted points, maybe, is the right way to think about that. There's a subtle leafiness. To me, it was a Bordeaux of old. The old Merlot-based wines that you would see in Bordeaux. You might or might not like that sort of green leaf in the background. It's mostly disappeared because of the maturity levels in the fruit, but it's there. And if you're a long-time drinker of Bordeaux wines, it's something, in fact, you probably very much like. Right?
No, I think it's got more of that kerosene that we used to see before they pulled so many leaves.
Green, as in. Yeah, but the leaf pulling is not necessarily connected to that. But there's something else in the olden days. When I got involved with drinking Bordeaux wines, I found that quality often, especially in the more basic, from less favored sites, less maturity. All right, less favored site. So I found, though, that let me just continue with this thought on the palate. I was actually more impressed by the quality of the taste of this wine. There was polish and there was poise, and there was, of course, the restraint and reserve for a very young wine. Clean, dry, well integrated, youthful tannin, balanced, good, very good. Maybe not, in the scheme of all wheat wines, maybe not near the top, okay? But a credible effort from a vintage, which, by the way, shall we say, if the vintage is relevant, it is because not the same maturity levels applied in 2017, did they? As in 16. Let's think about how blessed 2016 was in Bordeaux generally across districts. So it's unfortunate that Macquin is being paired, Macquin 17, with 16, all right? It's a bit unfair, exactly. I'm with you. But so be it. I'm glad to have a Saint-Georges in our tasting. So let's continue on. All right, now we're going to go to the areas to the east, further to the east. And we're going to do the two, as you saw at the outset, the two Côte de Bordeaux. Well, they're more only recently in the last 2 dozen years have they been designated as parts of the global, the umbrella Côte de Bordeaux appellation, mostly presented as Castillon Côte de Bordeaux, or the next wine, Côte de Bordeaux. So you can see you're at the sort of southeastern perimeter of the Libournais here. And there's some curious things about Castillon that maybe you don't know. Does the year Does the year 1453 say anything to anybody here? Yes. Wow, a lot of people say yes. Okay, tell me what. Tell me what it means to you.
It's the end of the
100 Years of War? And the British lost. Okay, two key facts. And since we live in a fact-free world, I embrace all facts.
And they allowed the peasantry to own land after that.
Oh, that's an interesting twist on the formula. So you know that probably, you probably just don't recall right now, but a rather bold English commander, Sir John Talbot, there's a property you may know over in Saint-Julien called Chateau, in the French pronunciation Talbot, all right, that he owned in the 15th century. Well, he brashly underestimated his French opponent, his French enemy, who were encamped and set up with a brilliant array of cutting edge, in the day, artillery. He also probably didn't know that he was facing the two Bureau brothers, one of whom was then, at the time, a master of the artillery in the French army. His brother thereafter became that same master. He didn't realize that his reckless cavalry charge without supporting troops was about to be decimated. They were about to be turned into cannon fodder, and so were subsequent waves of reinforcements sent to face the guns. So it's said, military historians say that this may be the first battle in history that was won decisively by artillery. An interesting story, no? It is. So you see, it's not just about wine. And today, let's bring it up to the present. Do you want to relive the Battle of Castillon? You don't want to relive it?
Well, I mean,
Not
Sounds like French Gettysburg.
excellent. All right, so here's the deal. Castillon-la-Bataille, which is the name of the town along the Dordogne River, castillonlabataille.com, go to the website. You will find how you can sign up, find lodging, buy tickets for, and attend the recreation this year, July, August, number of days, of the Battle of Castillon, with hundreds of volunteers, actors, and riders on horseback. So if you want to discover the charms of Bordeaux, away from the bright lights, away from the Grand Chateau, you know, spend a few days right there in Castillon, July and August. There are multiple dates. Okay, so I told you I'm easily detoured.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so let's talk about this wine because this is really good, and it's part of a family of wines owned by Silvio Dens, who also owns, do you know Péby Fougère? Does that name mean anything to you? And Fougère. All right, in fact, even though Cap de Fougère is on the Castillon side, the three properties are close to one another. So have you tasted the wine? Yeah. All right, you tell me about it then. Comments?
It has a lot of structure considering how much Merlot is in it. It's pretty warm too. It's not on the underripe side for sure.
So are you suggesting that it's a surprise that because it's overwhelmingly Merlot that it should have that much structure?
Yeah,
I think there's a misunderstanding, a common misunderstanding about Merlot the grape. Because it seems to me the tannin indexes are quite high in these Libonnais, the best ones. And hence they have more longevity than perhaps people expect. Then let me put it in a California context. What about Merlot grown in Napa Valley? It tastes more like Cabernet Sauvignon because of its tannic structure. Are you with me? Yeah. Okay, but it's an excellent point. Any other comments about the wine?
Probably the highest alcohol since one.
Yeah, that's a good question because I don't have the, I don't have the lab analysis. And you want to know, when I do these tastings, I hate just to rely on the published information on the website or whether it's nonsense. I pray every time that it's not really, just they're winging it to make a point with the buying public. I want to see the lab stats. That's what I try to do. I didn't do it this time. My apologies. So anything else I want to add? I have to say again, clean and youthful, because it's that above all. I love in the nose what I call the mélange of red fruits and wild red berries. And well integrated oak is there too, aromatically. It's clean and very fresh. There's that word fresh again in the mouth, okay? The fruit and the oak clearly have been assembled, have been joined, I think, successfully. There's more intensity of flavor, I found, on the finish, but still more to come. Still more to come. This to me is an overachiever. Castillon. How could it be this good? That's my impression as a wine drinker. And it's hardly a fortune of money.
My first impression was there was so much more acidity at the front end compared to the first three.
Well, maybe I have a hopelessly Francophilian palate, meaning that I call it the freshness, and I like that. I like the dryness and the edge, as long as it's not hard and severe. That too, though, depends on your palate and mine, right? I'm not saying to you, you shouldn't and can't find it that way. Yes?
I felt like this was the most evolved and the most baked as far as the fruit goes.
You think this is the most developed of all the wines we've had so far?
She was getting a lot of stewed, like more stewed.
Well, interesting, I found in the final taste char, as in oak char, and even a note of licorice in the final taste. But that's, these things are quite personal. Okay, let's continue on here. Let's continue on. Okay, where are we next? We are in next door, just to the north. Again, we're still along the eastern frontier of the Libournais in France, Côte de Bordeaux. And notice those colored dots. Those are actually color codings by the CIVB to represent the colors and types of wines being made in that appellation of origin. That's what that means. And you can see that we're really mostly talking about red wines only in this area, but there are two other colors, aren't there, here?
Skin contact or skin?
No, in terms of wines. Dry whites, the greenish.
Oh, I was kidding. Sorry.
That's good. Greenish dot, and the slightly golden dot represents the liqueur style, the sweet, even botrytis-affected wine, made in tiny quantities, of course. Okay, so I love this property. I've been tasting the wines from early on, before they were as good as they are right now. Puigaro, okay? Look at the situation here. I mean, come on, absolutely beautiful medieval chateau. Look at this, look at this. Do you think there maybe is some visiting that you should be doing over here in the hinterlands of the Libournais? I think maybe so, okay? Well, this is not an unknown. This is a pedigreed property and not the only one. Do you know the name Tiempo? Because you must, especially if you're a lover of wines of the right bank. How could you not? And they have so many properties in their portfolio that they split them up in terms of managing, directing, supervising amongst many family members. So this chateau and the subsequent one we'll taste are managed by Nicolas and Cyril, okay? So currently under vine in production, they have about 30 hectares. Once more, do we need to say, calcareous clay over that celebrated calcaire astérie, with clays and marls, of course, thrown in. And here is the wine I've referred to at the outset with a touch of Côte, all right, of Malbec. in the mix. But you knew that before you tasted it. You knew that it was in your head, or did you recognize it immediately? Wait a minute. This is the wine Roger was referring to when he said there was a single representative in our tasting which has Malbec in it. You knew this when you put your nose to glass, didn't you? I'm joking, of course. All right. So have you tasted it? Of course you have. Price point. Ooh. No, it's in the mid-20s, I'd say, commonly. 22 is what, yeah, good for you. So it's been a good value for a long time. Yeah, wow is what I say. As I'm a value shopper, you know. I love the greatest wines of the world. How could I not? I would never refuse a glass if someone offered me one.
Right.
But when I spend my own money and drink wine every day, wow, I'd be thrilled to have Puigaro on the table. Young, yes, now, okay. What do you think about the oak treatment? 1/3 new seemed about right, or for a year plus, yeah. So let me see if anything else leaps out at me on my tasting notes here. What else do I have here? Concentration and intensity in the nose, the very first thing I noticed here. Dark fruits, and yes, oak coming through. Now, on the palate, substance, flesh, some degree of weight. Young and promising. All right. Depth and early persistence as well. So those are pretty positive markers for an inexpensive wine that's going to be really good in 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 years. Yeah.
How does one compare to the Lafleur de Bouard?
Well, we have the proprietor here in the room, but they use a higher percentage at Lafleur de Bouard than is common here. But as I said, it's a stylistic choice. The key to me as a taster is that there has to be the raw material in the wine to support the oak. Right? Well, we say of course, but around the world, there has been such a love affair with new oak, new French oak in particular. It's such a love affair over the years. It's waning, thankfully. It's waning because I don't think, and here I'm proselytizing, I don't think you ever want to overshine by adding on a layering of something other than the fruit itself, the intrinsic flavor of the wine. That's my personal bias.
Quick question, what do you think the Malbec adds? Is there any hint of Malbec in it? Can you taste it?
Could I have tasted it? Could I have told you? Absolutely not.
Can you smell it though?
No.
I know, but that's what I'm asking.
Well, you know what? Anybody who says they can really identify blind 5% of Côte in the wine, ooh boy, that's.
But it has something different, maybe.
Yes, it does.
Maybe I'm
It does, but see, okay, so let's say that it maybe seems a little different than the wines we've tasted. Where would that lead you? If I really wanted to be clinical about it, I would have to go to the property. I'd have to taste individual cuves I would have to try the Merlot and the Cabernet Franc separately, side by side, and the Côte, and then maybe I could say, oh, you know, there are certain distinguishing features here at this property that might lead me in that direction. But now, tasting it in the glass, not knowing, not a chance.
So it says whole berries there. Do you think there's a little bit of stem influence, adding some savoriness? And not a whole bunch, but
maybe,
some little
yes,
bit.
very possibly. Very possibly. All right, let me keep moving because I'm afraid I'm taking way too much time. So, La Prade is the partner property, not as well known as Puigaro, but deserves to be, well, let me say, better known. Are you ready? Because, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to enter a new realm of the Calcasol wines, the last three. We started on the other side in Geology of Pomerol for one representative of those soil profiles. And now we're in this world of these more or less limestone influenced examples, okay? and we're closing in on the superstars of this style. So, yes, again, Tiempo family. This is a tiny little property. There isn't much wine ready to be had. That's a problem for a wine lover, and it's a problem because it is so, shall I say, damn good that you really want to get your hands on some of it. And it's not a fortune of money either. 40-year-old vines, densities, on the whole, we're talking about densities of usually around 5,500 and 5,000 here in these various Libournais appellations. Some properties of their own choosing have decided to increase that concentration of vines, okay, believing that it'll lead to a finer result in the end in terms of the wine. They do various other things. I think you mentioned leaf thinning, or someone did. You did debudding, leaf thinning. Oh, they practice that here in this Tiempo family. Whole berry fermentation. Here we are again in concrete, okay. And then they use 2 different size barrels with about a 1/3 new. What do you think about the wine? You've tried it? I have to say I got a little weak at the knee when I finished tasting this. I mean, my past memories of it have been very good, but I love this 2016. I love it. I love it. Let me see some of the descriptors that leap out to me here from the La Prade. Did you want to say something?
I think this one's a more delicate rendition compared to the Pomerol, if I say that. But yeah, this is a little more delicate, more finessey.
I think structurally, this wine stands apart in the tasting. Structurally. The mouthfeel is different. It may not have as much sinew and muscle as some. No, it's not that. I'm looking at some of the words. But first, what strikes me is the maturity of the fruit. Beautiful, beautiful fruit, even though it's muted in the expression. But it has generosity, even in the nose itself. There's a certain. And I love silky because I have what do I have here? Quite soft at this stage, with hidden, and that's the key word, hidden acidity and fine-grained tannin. But it's concealed. You might think there isn't any structure there, but there is some. But it is a sensual wine. Now, this is the archetypal Merlot, according to the textbooks, isn't it? Right? This is what, you think about the soft, pleasing, forward, earlier drinking style. And yet, don't be fooled, this will keep beautifully. I'd love to see this, in the coming decade. All right, let's keep going on. Are we good so far? Great. Everything all right? Okay, I told you this was going to be a little bit different, right, than the other things that I've done for you. All right, now let's go to one of the most historic appellations of Bordeaux. Wait a minute, Roger. Did you just say that Fronsac was one of the most historic appellations in Bordeaux? I did say that. Yeah, you're right. And within it, we don't sadly have any representatives in our tasting. We have the little enclave, again, of Canon Fronsac. This is a very particular place. It's very hilly compared to the areas we've looked at. In fact, locally, it's called the Little Tuscany. Little Tuscany. And there's this tertre, this promontory, which had such a command over the landscape. And by the way, Fronsac itself, strategic position. The town of Libourne over the river, specifically the Dordogne, points south. The Romans built a outpost on the top of the hill, the largest hill. Charles the Great, Emperor Charlemagne, built his own fortified villa in the year 769. It was followed by a medieval chateau, a castle of some sort, and tragically, we don't have any remains really of those earlier structures to look at. But this is a place, in a sense, that they claim, of course, claims are always made by individual regions making wine, that they are in a sense a birthplace of the idea of the cru, the chateau in Bordeaux. Maybe you thought it was Aubryon that actually did that. Well, who's to say? All right, we have two beautiful, beautiful, beautiful properties here. These now, if they weren't before, have to be on your Bordeaux radar screen, both of them. Château de la Dauphine, well, look at this. You think, wait a minute, am I in Pauillac? Am I in Saint-Julien? Where am I? Exactly. The property, both properties, in fact, are really stunning. Look at this. Look at the landscape. Look at the structure itself. Oh my God, come on, this is wine heaven. Wine heaven. Now, this is an interesting exercise I want you to look at, because I've been spouting off a lot about soils, and I don't know if you read French, but if you're close enough. Anyway, over to the right you have the legend, and you have the map of their holdings, their property, color-coded according to the soil type. Shall we walk through very quickly and see what we have here? The yellowish, which is more or less upslope, isn't it? It's a calcareous soil with a loamy clay over the asteriated limestone. And then the pale gray, which is this here, these areas, pale gray, also a sort of a limestone, but this is more silty and clayey over, not the calcaire but the molasse du Fronsac. I promised you at the beginning that we'd come back repeatedly to the, these references, these terms. And then it goes on from there. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. What I want you to do now is to consider the question. This property grows two varieties. How would you imagine, where would you imagine they planted each of the two varieties in relation to soil? Was soil the determining factor as to which grape they planted where on their property? Was it? Or the fact perhaps that they're only working with two varieties, one of them, obviously Merlot, overwhelmingly in the majority, they didn't have that liberty. They had to actually plant, especially Merlot, across various soil types. And if you thought that, you would be right. You would be right. So we have the pale gray is Cabernet Franc, and the, what would we call that, deep red is Merlot, deep red. So let's go back. You want to go back? Take a look at that. All right, see the various soil types, and then look here at where each of the two grapes is planted. I think this is a fascinating exercise. It shows that, I'm going to leap ahead. The implication of this is that they're going to end up with fruit, Merlot in particular, expressing multiple sites and soils across the property. In other words, they will not have one uniform personality of Merlot, which might come from 2 or 3 uniform parcels. This is something else. It's a different concept at work here. And talk about the renovation of Bordeaux, the things that have happened in Bordeaux in the last 15, 20 years. The Bordelais owe all of you a lot of thanks because their bank accounts have been flush. They may not say so. They're flush, and they've spent it, and there are fantastic renovations that have occurred all across Bordeaux. Millions of euros have been spent on cellars. Just amazing things, breathtaking. It astounds me every time I see a new design and a new architect has stepped in to create. Oh my gosh, what a beautiful barrel cellar! Oh my goodness, I love. That's the word, Lynn, that strikes me. There's a harmony. The harmony in the cellar, harmony in the wine. There's a suggestive reasoning there. Okay, so they have about a little less than 100 acres in production. Let's not even say, because we've already talked about the different soils. Density's a little bit higher here, 90% Merlot, so even higher here now. Vines can and will be older, and it makes me wonder when I taste this 2016, when the vines average, let's say 40 years of age, how much more dimension this wine, Chateau La Dauphine, might have. They practice organic biodynamic here. It's manual picking, very low yields for the 2016. Very low yields. I think they're telling the truth. They do a double sorting. That's becoming increasingly common. I hear of properties doing triple sorting too. Oh my God. All in the quest of quality. It's for the good, in other words. All destemmed, vertical pressing. They use steel and concrete. The mallows in barrel, which more or less happens, depends on the property, but only for a part of the overall cuvee, and a dozen months in 30% new oak. Have you tasted the wine?
Roger, I thought this was owned by the family that owns Carrefour, but maybe I'm wrong.
I'm not 100% sure about that.
Okay.
Not 100% sure. Anybody want to step forward and offer some descriptors for La Dauphine, maybe?
Probably the deepest and darkest in color of the
Deepest
wine.
and darkest. I wrote my code D-, meaning not quite dense, but almost there. Yeah, I'm with you. Concentrated, youthful, reserved, but also intense first impression to the nose. Mature, but not overripe in any sense. Perfectly mature, dark fruits, and oak entwined. That's what I will. I love the harmony. We were talking about that before. Oak and wine. They're not dominating. They're working together to achieve an even better, grander result. Yeah.
I think it has a little bit of that limestone Saint-Émilion flavor in there too. I'm thinking of.
Well, may I suggest the following, that it's known locally that Fronsac and Canon Fronsac within it are an echo of the limestone and the south-facing slopes of Saint-Émilion. So you're right on target, 100%. So the palate impression was a little different to me. Immediately engaging. I love that it feels when it has style and panache. I think I liked it, right? Just enough tension and sinew. Just enough to kind of complete it, balance it. Excellent. Excellent. Superb in 8 to 10 years. Shall we go to our finale?
Pourquoi pas?
Let's do it. And I think we may want, up to you, because you'll decide. I don't tend to pick favorites regardless of the tasting. Sometimes it's obvious which wine is the best. Let's say you have 3 wines. You pick one that's one's really the winner. Now you can argue objectively why it would be the case. But mostly, and in a tasting like this, where you have serious proprietors doing their best to achieve the best outcome, I want to always recognize quality. I don't want to diminish it by picking one single favorite out of a group like this. Unfair, untrue. But I think that I hear a small drum roll as we go towards the conclusion here. All right, another just beautiful, beautiful property with, again, a modern twist. Look at this. What could this possibly be? When I first saw the images of this, the aerial images, I said, this looks like a super yacht that's been dropped into the wooded countryside. Look at this. This is an amazing place. They just completed these renovations in 2019. All right, it just captures me. The concept behind it. It all begins with the idea, doesn't it? Well, careful work is a given. And here's a little vinification intégrale where they do the fermentation in barrel. And look at this gleaming steel. Now, what can you say about stainless steel? Not much. But, it's part considering, and look at the semicircle. and where it's placed. Now you've seen it from the outside within the winery facility. Okay, this is a property that goes back to the 1600s. This is not a newcomer by any means. It's only about 15 hectares in terms of plantings, all right? It's partly on the flatter ground and also on slopes. Grape formula, as we've been talking about. The density's a little bit higher as well here. 38-year-old vines on average, they say. Only a manual harvest. You notice the yields are a little bit more than the preceding wine. They use steel and concrete. We saw that already. Malolactics in the barrel. And it's a year and a half in half new oak. Now, based on the comments I've made, how would you think I personally would react to the fact that that percentage is a little bit higher? My answer, to jump to the conclusion here, since we don't have that much time, is to say, I love it. It works perfectly, perfectly, to me, to my taste, all right? Fantastic expression of dark fruits in the nose. Skillful use of oak. Those are just the aromatic points. That's beautiful and refined at an early stage in the mouth. A touch sweet from the ripeness of the fruit, with a ripe undercurrent to the wine. It has a seductive mouthfeel, very fine structure in the conclusion. Everything is in place in this wine. And there's budding complexity. Budding, not there yet. Budding complexity as well. I love it. I love it. I love it. So, as I said, we have some good wines. We have some good wines in this tasting, I think. I hope you agree. I hope maybe you've found some new friends. New friends. You can spend your money very well here amongst these lesser known, let's call them, lesser known areas of the Libournais. So continue discovering. Continue discovering. Thank you very much.
Bravo.
Thank you.